Hello, welcome back. It's been a while. It feels slightly awkward to start recording. I just came back on Monday from my field trip, research fieldwork trip in Serbia, and I am procrastinating. I am lying in bed staring at the ceiling throughout the day, thinking about all the things that I could have done differently, having mild anxiety attacks. But hey, such is life. You can only regret what you didn't do and hope you do better next time. I'm just yammering. Also, do not pay attention to this situation on my head. I have like literally three hairs in two rows at this point. My hair is falling out at a rate that I don't even know how I have anything left on my head. Yeah, so that's another thing that I should be feeling anxious about. So that's how my summer has started. I hope yours is a little bit better than mine. I did do some reading, and as some of you who are watching this channel for some time know, I am terrible at introducing myself right at the start of the video. So for those who are new, if you come across this video by the blessing of the algorithm gods, I'm Alex. I'm a PhD student in political science department at the Faculty of Social Sciences in Ljubljana. And I am dabbling in the topic of politics of care, in particular, politics of care inside the ecological movements in Serbia. And I like to read, as you have been able to tell by this channel. So, what I've been reading recently, I read actually my whole of June was me deciding to take a break. Well, not a whole of June, but a big chunk of it. Take a break from theoretical books for my PhD. I was feeling rather yuck about my PhD, my research, and I was kind of in a space that where I didn't want to read any books that I need to continue my work, and I wanted to maybe read something just to kind of ease my mind out of this very conflictuous feeling I have about my PhD at the moment. But they said this is a normal process and it's one of the stages that you go through while you're doing your PhD. So I guess I should just trust the process. Now I think my PhD makes no sense. It's not doing anything. I make no sense. I am stupid. I am, all of these nasty things that you can think of or say to yourself when you are in doubt about whatever you are doing. And in order to make myself feel a little bit better, I started to read some books that I thought would make me feel a little bit better. Some of them did make me feel better. Others left me very much frustrated. But I did enjoy the process. So on to the books. The first one I read is The Bandit Queens by Parini Shroff. I actually became acquainted with this book just few months before it was nominated for a Women's Prize for Fiction. And I was listening to a podcast where the author was interviewed, and she was talking about the publishing industry and the process of getting this book published, and how some of the manuscripts that she was writing before were rejected. And she was talking about this very kind of narrow space within the publishing industry that you as an author are requested to fill in order to get published. So if you're publishing something that is at the time not considered, a book that can succeed in the market, then you are not going to get published. And I thought that was very interesting. And since then, I wanted to read the book, and I felt like it could be a fun book to read. The book is based on a true story set in a village in India. It follows women who are part of this alone group for their small businesses. And the main character, Gita, is a widowed woman. At least that's what the villagers believe. They believe that she killed her husband and got away with it. So she takes a full opportunity of this gossip and kind of uses it as a form of distancing herself from the rest of the village, because her presence incites fear that, she's a witch and she can do all kinds of nasty things to you if you bother her. But the book actually opens up with the argument that the women are having at lone group meeting. One of them is missing, and she did not give her payment for that week. So somebody has to step in and pay for her. So Gita does it. And this is the start of the plot. So she kind of is approached by this woman who is married to a man who's abusive and is stealing her money for his alcohol addiction, and pleads Gita to help her kill him. And this is how the story starts. I thought that this book is brilliant in exploring the position of women in India. I've learned a lot of things that I had no idea were even possible, that you need to take into account as a woman when you live in such small villages. For example, one of the things that she was discussing at length was how young girls had to postpone going to the toilet because the toilets are on the outskirts of the villages or behind the houses in the fields. And very often they would be sexually assaulted if they would go to pee at night. So they would postpone it until dawn, but even at dawn this can happen. And how careful you have to be, like if you are moving about certain areas in the village, the remote areas, which are fields where the food is being cultivated, where also a lot of women work. So also the caste system, that's very much at the center of the novel, and how the caste system and misogyny is affecting the women in India, and how these two intersect. I really enjoyed this. It is a satire. It is very exaggerated at times, especially the last part of the book. If you're looking for something that's gonna make you laugh but also make you think, then this is for you. But at the same time, the writing style is not very sophisticated, I would say. It has an easy flow to it. So don't expect, I don't know, even though it was nominated for Women's Prize for Fiction, I think it deserved the nomination, but overall, I mean, there are much better written books than this one. Next one I want to talk about, it's Domestic Animal by Francis King. I actually I bought 3 books that are published. This is McNally editions. This is number 48. And then I went online to their official webpage and looked into some of the books they are going to be publishing, and they have already published, and I found several novels that I would like to read. So far, it has not disappointed, the selection of the novels that they have for this publication edition. This book was really frustrating. It is a queer novel that was published in late 60s or early 70s, And I think it has to be censored at some point because it is about the obsession a man has for another man. And at the time, I think homosexuality in UK was illegal. Um, I thought the character development was great. The writing style, I really loved it. And um, it really felt it was a fast-paced read for me, but at the same time I was hoping for a different outcome at by the time I would finish it. Of course that didn't happen, and I felt that this book is a great exploration how one falls for a manipulative person and how difficult it is to stay away from them. So it's about a very successful author in his, I think, early 50s or late 40s, uh, or maybe a little bit older. And he lives in a small town, and he has this acquaintance who rents rooms in her house. And she asks him at one point whether he would be willing to take a lodger on. And at first, he's reluctant until he actually meets him. And it is a philosophy. I'm not sure if he's a student or he's doing his postdoc research at the faculty in a nearby town. So he's looking for an apartment, and despite his initial hesitation and actually also being aware that he's going to lose money by taking him on for the for the price that they agree, um, he goes with it. He becomes very fast infatuated with him. I think right on the first meeting you are having this long description of him observing Antonio and kind of like taking his whole existence in. Um, and yeah, it is a novel about obsession, about toxic relationships, and how it is very difficult for us to say no to people that we are under a spell of. Um, so it's I felt so frustrated because Dick is very good at understanding where all of these feelings are coming from. He even explores, he gives an account actually of his previous relationships that were similar to this one, and how he understands the position that he's in, and the way he's unable to say no to Antonio, but at the same time, even though he's very um, rationally reflecting on this situation, he's unable to change anything. And yeah, I mean, it has no plot really. It is more of a character study, and it is also a sort of romance novel, but in a literary fiction style. And I did think about the consequences that the author must have faced once this was published. I I think it's a good novel. It was very well written, but it was really frustrating to read it. Simply because I expected more of you, Dick. I hope you can hear me. Next one is actually a memoir that I just recently ordered. I did not know that this author had published a new book, and that is The Hour of the Wolf by Fatima Bhutto. My first contact with Fatima Bhutto was in 2018 when I was listening to the Intercept podcast back in the day when Jeremy Scahill was was moderating it, and she was a guest, and she was talking about her two books that were published at the time. One of them was the novel, and the other one was, I think, more like a nonfiction about the rise of K-pop. The novel I read, it's called Runaways, and I got it on my vacation in 2020, just as the COVID hit, and I read it maybe like 2 months later. And I loved her writing. I love that novel a lot. If you have not read it, you should. It's a brilliant novel. The focus of the memoir is um, on, first of all, on the toxic relationship that she was in for 10 years, abusive relationship. But it's also about her love for animals and dogs in particular, and how her love for her dog Coco helped her leave the man she was with for 10 years in this abusive relationship. And it was difficult to read it at times, and what I felt that this memoir did very well is convey this message that this can happen to you, no matter your class, your race, your education, your economical independence. You can end up in an abusive relationship, and she actually explores that very well. I'm gonna read this one part. She says, "My father loved animals, they were drawn to him. If there was an animal in the room, it inevitably gravitated towards him, seeking his comfort and attention. He was gentle, devoting his curiosity to the animals as though in conversation with them. When my childhood dog, a Belgian shepherd called Pedro, bit me because I was annoying him by trying to sit on him, I went howling to my father, who picked me up and let me cry into his perfectly ironed shirt. Hit him, I demanded between tears. He hurt me. My father was quiet, ignoring me. When I asked him again to reprimand the dog, he said no. I won't hit him. You were at fault. Don't be rough with Pedro." I thought that was such a brilliant lesson for a child to understand that animals also have boundaries and that you should respect those boundaries. And if you are not able to read the cues that the animals are giving you, so you understand what their boundary is, then you're going to learn the hard way. Obviously, in this case, she was bit. And I'm sure Pedro didn't beat her like to chew her arm off, but just to give her a slight warning. Um, and then another segment that I'm going to share, it's on page 56. It says, "The most significant events in our private, intimate lives can never be spoken about with strangers, except in books." The writer and memoirist Edmund White once wrote, "My life had been broken by grief, and then for a period it was redeemed by love. But people do not love each other in the same way, and sometimes there is terror in love. I wanted a family more than anything in the world. The man didn't. But instead of acknowledging that we wanted different things and that we might be better off in pursuit of such separate lives, we stayed together. It is difficult to look back now and see that I tolerated this for as long as I did. Some men take strong women as a challenge and derive pleasure in breaking them or trying to. And when you are a strong woman, you also might not think this can happen to you, that you might be in trouble, that someone you care for might be dangerous to you." It's one of the really interesting things how she also explores the shame that she felt for staying for such a long time in this relationship, and the shame that she felt when she couldn't tell the doctor that the bite marks on her arm were actually bite marks from her partner who bit her and thought it was funny to do it. And I also wanted to say, oh yeah, one interesting aspect is that she never actually uses a name for this person. She calls him the man. So in the sense, she's erasing him. She's erasing him, his identity, his personhood, and all the complexities that come with being an abusive partner. And I thought that was very cleverly done, and it felt a little bit like she was regaining her own agency by writing about him in this way, not naming him, not giving him the power to know that he in he actually was big part of her adult life. And another aspect that I kept thinking while I was reading it is that this was actually happening at the time when I first listened to the interview she gave with Jeremy Scahill, and 2 years later when I was also reading her novel. So while I was like engaging with her and her work, she was going through this. And it's so interesting to reflect how we can engage with authors' work, at least authors that are alive, and we don't really know what's going on in their life. We might admire their work and think how brilliant they are, how admire the success that they have achieved, but at the same time, they might be going through some very difficult things in life. And it really made me pause and think that, uh, whatever whatever presentation a person might have for the public, their internal struggles are their own. Next one is Natalia Ginzburg, Valentino. I have made it my mission to finish reading all of the publications of Natalia Ginzburg that are available at the moment. And this one is a short novella. It follows the main character, the sister of Valentino. She has a name. It's mentioned, I think, once or twice in the book, but I forgot. So the first 3 pages, it's actually very funny. You have two sentences, positive sentences, that are saying that his family is hoping that Valentino is going to be a man of consequence. In the middle part of these 3 pages, you have a long paragraph where his sister is explaining why Valentino believes he's not going to be a man of consequence. I'm going to read this a little bit for you. I thought it was really funny. And honestly, I don't think I've seen an author write so brilliantly about such mundane things in life as Ginsburg was able to. Here it says, "My father believed that he was destined to become a man of consequence. There was little enough reason to believe this, but he believed it all the same and had done ever since Valentino was a small boy, and perhaps found it difficult to break the habit. My father spent his days in the kitchen, dreaming and muttering to himself, fantasizing about the future when Valentino would be a famous doctor and attend medical congresses in the great capitals and discover new drugs and new diseases. Valentino himself seemed devoid of any ambition to become a man of consequence. In the house, he usually spent his time playing with the kitten or making toys for the caretaker's children out of scraps of old material stuffed with sawdust, fashioning cats and dogs and monsters too, with big heads and long, lumpy bodies, or he would don his skiing outfit and admire himself in the mirror. Not that he went skiing very often, for he was lazy and hated the cold, but he had persuaded my mother to make him an outfit all in black with a great white woolen balaclava. He thought himself no end of fine fellow in these clothes and would strut about in front of the mirror first with scarf thrown about his neck and then without, and would go out onto the balcony so that the caretaker's children could see him. I mean, it's also a brilliant study of patriarchy, how his parents, despite seeing who their child is, he got the privilege of um, utter investment, parental investment, financial investment in his education, while his sisters struggled. So we have three siblings. So it's the sister, the youngest one, who's actually telling the story, Valentino, and the older sister who's already married. And the older sister is financially struggling. She's trying to make ends meet with her sewing um, house business. She can't afford a dentist. She has a constant toothache, and she's walking with this bandaged up like scarf around her head, trying to make her toothache bearable so she could do the work. And it was really frustrating to read it at times, but I really thought this was a brilliant study of the Italian society and the obsession parents can have with their male children. Valentino is also a queer book, so if you are looking for classics of queer literature, I would suggest you pick it up. Next one is, and the final one is A Native Country of the Heart by Cherríe Moraga. So I picked this one up last year when I was in Vienna, and I thought after reading Valentino, I should read a nonfiction, and I had great expectations for this book. But unfortunately, it was a disappointment for me. I'm gonna get soon to that, but first, I will say that this is a sort of autobiography through a biography. So it is Cherríe Moraga's autobiography through the biography of her mother. We are told a story of the life of her mother, and the first maybe 2 or 3 chapters are basically written. I mean, the whole book is written from this angle of love, unconditional love for her parent that she has. And for the first 3 chapters, she gives us this very rosy picture of her mother, who was in a way, a victim of her own mother and of patriarchal norms and also of racism in America. And the whole memoir is sort of like this border memoir. It's transgressing between different binarisms that we create and construct, and I thought that was brilliantly done. But one of the things that felt very frustrating is that Cherríe Moraga was struggling to acknowledge that despite the fact that her mother was a victim, she was also a perpetrator of violence. We learn through her retelling that her mother was very violent towards her children, and we know from feminist theory that this is a frequent event. This is a frequent occurrence. I have a postman ringing. I'll be right back. So I'm back. I just picked up my package. So, where was I? Yeah, she struggles to acknowledge that despite her mom being a victim of racism and, I mean, the target, and also very much abused by her family members and used also by her family members, that she was at the same time a perpetrator of patriarchal violence. And we see that in the treatment that she the relationship that she has with her son and her daughters, and especially the elder daughter, who becomes more like this submissive daughter that is trying her best to please her mother, to live a life that her mother deems she should live, for like that is a life that a woman should live. And it's very heartbreaking to read that. At times she does kind of reflect on it, but she just glances over it. And I'm gonna give you an example here. She says, the prison in her fault, she thinks. Had she educated herself, she wouldn't be in this situation. Powerless among the gringos, she couldn't even last a few weeks in adult school. Pendeja. That was what was wrong with her brain. Not her memory, but education. Had she gone back to school, she could have written her way out of this prison. Or so she desperately needed to believe. Elvira was no victim. Although I disagree with this statement that she was no victim, she was, but at the same time, she was also a perpetrator. And right after that, instead of like elaborating further on this aspect that she explored, she goes into the shock her sister experienced once she realized that her mother is struggling to remember the names of her children, just before she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So instead of like elaborating what she means by this, why she thinks her mother was no victim, she just kind of glances over it. Another part also I'm going to read. She says, the amazing efficacy of patriarchy is that it is a covert operation. It is entre nos, just between us, a man and a woman, sister and brother, father and daughter, queer and not so queer. It takes place behind closed doors, inside La Hacienda, and back there in the slave quarters. It is so seamlessly woven into the fiber of our lives that to pull that at that dangling thread of inequality is to rip open an entire life. And I think this is what she's not able to do, to pull that thread to rip the entire life. Because by the end of the book, what she does is actually she justifies her mother and her unconditional love for her mother based on the fact that she's her blood relation. And for someone who writes also in the memoir that she's queer Chicana, a lesbian Chicana, and she uses this like notion of queer family at one point in the memoir, just to kind of conclude it with this kind of like blood is not water argument. It was kind of like, what? It really didn't make any sense to write. How many pages is this? Around 230-page memoir to in the end say that all is forgiven, all is justifiable by whatever actions our parents took, and we should forgive them and have understanding for it just because they were our parents. And there is also a huge emphasis on this understanding of familia within the Mexican culture, which I find extremely patriarchal. She's using this as a form of justification for her mother's behavior and for her mother being extremely conservative in many aspects. And just tiny details like this. I'm not sure whether anyone else who has read this memoir would have noticed this, but I was going through the comments on Storygraph of people who have read it, and I didn't find a single one that was expressing any kind of disagreement with the author's perspective. I didn't see any reflections on the problems inside the memoir that I found. Maybe it's just me. I don't know. If you have read it, I would really like to hear your thoughts on it, not just this one, but also the other books that I read. One thing I did forget to mention is the domestic animal has a lot of racist tones, a lot of racist prejudice expressed, and it uses a lot of these racial slurs that for our time is not acceptable. However, even though it is in the novel, I think it depicts very accurately how these things were spoken about at the time when this novel was published. So I don't have any issues having this in novels, especially if they are depicting a particular social norm of the time when this was taking place. So if you, I mean, it's kind of like a trigger warning from me to you. If you would find it difficult to read, then maybe this is not something that you should pick up. Yeah, and that's it. I will be making next week a video about David Graeber and where you should start with his work if you're interested. And I hope you stick around. Thank you for watching, and like and subscribe, share, and see you soon. Bye.